Welcome to a news update, Paddle and Portage. As you likely already know, we have ice. If you listen to the last episode of the podcast, it's all about ice. Speaking of ice, David Welch.
You blew up the Instagram account, your own, for Bear Witness Media, as well as Paddle and Portage Instagram. What have you done?
It's ridiculous what the internet finds appealing, as we've discussed. Not ridiculous, but just fascinating. On a recent lunch excursion to skate on the ice with my pal David Welch, I happened to bring a little bit of recording equipment just in case. And instead of showing up on ice skates, which we had been out on the day before, he showed up with a completely different and profoundly unusual recreational travel method.
The ice skateboard.
Here's David Welch in a brief snowy lakeside interview.
My name is David Welch. Yeah, I got this longboard and took off the wheels and put on these ice skate blades. Turned it into a skateboard, ice skateboard. Yeah, it's super fun, especially downwind, You get to get a few turns in. You can't go too steep with your turns or you slide out. And it's all kind of new to me, so I think I'm going to sharpen these up and try to get a little more carve next time I'm out. But mostly it's just super fun new way to, get on the ice and have a blast,
To see the video of the ice skateboard and see David and so forth, you can go to the Instagram page for Paddle and Portage. Also, it's embedded in the article. If you don't use Instagram for whatever reason or have an account, you can go to the article that we have on paddleandportage.com.
Yeah, we did a real low-key Q&A with David that you can find and read on the paddleandportage.com web platform. Hard to say that an ice skateboard is news, but what's very obviously news is updates on the RABC process that you've been covering. You have been swimming in this information and have some things to share.
That's right. I had a few people come down to the Paddle and Portage headquarters here in Grand Marais who are impacted or will be by the pause, as the Canadian government is saying, and referring to this about the renewal or the issuance of new applications for the remote area border crossing permits, which gets you across places like Saganaga at the end of the Gunflint Trail without having to go through a customs checkpoint. So those permits been around, utilized for many, many years. You and I have used them, have one, and so forth. But there are some business owners that have property and businesses on the Canadian side of Sag who are U.S. citizens and residents, live here in Cook County near Grand Marais, and they're going, we don't know if we can get across the border to run our resort, and more importantly, we don't know if our guests will be able to use the remote area border crossing permit to get across. I also talked to somebody who built a cabin on the Canadian side of Sag, used their retirement money to do that. And so we're going to hear next on the podcast from Donny and Lisa Sorlie. They own Chippewa Inn on the Canadian side of Sag, and from Darin Fagerman, who is a retired conservation officer from here in Cook County for the DNR, and who invested his retirement into building this dream cabin on the Canadian side of Sag. This episode of the Paddle and Portage podcast is supported in part by Red Bud Suds. They're on a mission to kick single-use plastic and simplify your routine both at home and in the backcountry. Their all-natural 4-in-1 shower bars are formulated to be shampoo, conditioner, body, and shave all in one. You can check out their Gunflint Peppermint Bar, which gives back 10% to Save the Boundary Waters campaign, and their adventures are now made in Michigan. You can check them out at redbudsuds.com. Thanks to Lisa and the team at Red Bud Suds for all their support of the podcast this year. And yes, we have seen Andy up at Tuscarora Checking the ice conditions in and around Round Lake. Most of the lakes now are frozen here as we're getting into mid-December. And this episode's supported by Tuscarora Lodge and Canoe Outfitters. Indeed, located on Round Lake, Tuscarora is a full-service Boundary Waters outfitter serving Gunflint Trail entry points. They're now booking 2025 canoe trips and cabins. You can check them out online at TuscaroraCanoe.com or on their robust social media pages, Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. They're still booking holiday and winter cabin stays as well.
Hi, this is Rachel. I work for Friends of the Boundary Waters out of Ely as the Northern Education Coordinator. We hope you all have had a really incredible 2024. If you'd like to keep supporting Friends in the upcoming year, you can visit our website where you can donate, and we'd love to have you be a part of our journey as we keep protecting this incredible place and teaching people all about it.
What we've got here is failure to communicate.
Echoing the sentiments from the Paul Newman film Cool Hand Luke, there's ongoing concern from business owners and other property owners on the Canadian side of Saganaga Lake, as well as other border lakes, regarding the future of the remote area border crossing program.
We feel as though we've been left in the dark. Totally 100% left in the dark. With no rhyme, reason. Least they could do is talk. I understand, I've said this before, that an RABC is a privilege. It's not a right. But it's a privilege we've all paid for. It's happened because they've shut down their remote guard stations, or whatever you want to call them.
The customs.
Mm-hmm. And this is a thing they set up. And if they're not going to honor it, at least they can do is talk to us. Because there's 50 cabin owners, there's, number around 50. And, they're all sitting there, they got their life and their whatever, and they're all, they're all hanging in the same balance.
That's Donny Sorlie, one of the co-owners of the Chippewa Inn on the Canadian side of Sag, which is located near the end of the Gunflint Trail. After more than a month of questioning from members of the press, including the team here at Paddle and Portage, as well as congressional staff here in Minnesota's 8th Congressional District, business owners in and around the Gunflint Trail and Ely area, as well as people who are just left feeling in the dark, Canadian officials are still being vague when it comes to the future of the RABC program. Donny and his wife Lisa met with me at the Paddle and Portage headquarters in Grand Marais on December 10th to discuss how the pause of the RABC program, as Canadian officials are calling it, is impacting their plans for the upcoming winter and the 2025 open water season. The Sorlies bought Chippewa Inn in 2023 from the Powell family. It's a legendary and iconic resort on Sag. Lisa said that guests have already reserved cabins for next year in 2025, and they're very concerned about how they'll be able to access the small resort if RABCs are not an option. As for this upcoming winter, Lisa said that things are temporarily on pause in terms of booking reservations at the resort.
You were trying to be open this winter, right?
We had planned on it, but I have stopped talking about being open on the winter since we heard of this 6 weeks ago. So we haven't been on our Facebook page talking about this because we don't want to raise people's hopes. And as you are aware, we have not put in for our work permits yet. We'll probably just go ahead and do it. Our concern was that if it's not open by summer, we're going to cancel all of the reservations made, most likely, unless people are willing to do the long drive around. And then we may have to look at different work options to still pay our bills.
Unless the pause on RABC permits has changed in the months ahead, snowmobilers, anglers, canoeists, and property owners on lakes at the end of the Gunflint Trail won't be able to access Canadian border waters if their permit expires without first entering through the Pigeon River Crossing or another official port of entry. What the RABC permit does is it allows U.S. citizens to cross into Canada on some border lakes, from Lake Superior all the way over to Rainy Lake, without stopping at a customs checkpoint, such as the Pigeon River entry point in Grand Portage. These permits cost about $35 to process, and they must be renewed annually. If the RABC permits are not renewed, Donnie says that having people trying to access SAG from the Canadian side on Northern Light Lake or Trout Bay Road would be nearly impossible. Those roads are rough back in there, and the access is tough any time of year. Joining in the Sorlies at the Paddle and Portage headquarters office in Grand Marais December 10th was longtime Cook County resident Darin Fagerman. A retired conservation officer for the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources, Fagerman spent many years checking anglers and hunters in the woods for their license and permits and so forth, and as well as on waters near the Gunflint Trail and other parts of the county. Fagerman said that he built a cabin on the Canadian side of Sag, his favorite lake in the Boundary Waters region, in hopes of spending significant amounts of time there, including with his 4-year-old grandson and other family members. Without an RABC permit, accessing the cabin is an entirely different process.
How about you, Mr. Fagerman? What's your stake in this? Why do you?
Well, because I built a cabin and I invested most of my retirement savings in it. So, I'm kind of living a little different life. So pretty much all of my retirement savings, I went and built a new place up there, and I don't consider myself old, but when you get around 60 years old, you start realizing that you have to have a certain level of health and capability to get to these places because they're remote. Maybe at 85 years old or whatever, you're not going to get there, and tomorrow's not guaranteed when it comes to your health. And, I've got a grandson now that's 4 years old. He likes to fish, and this is the time to make memories with the kids, and it'd be devastating for our family that if we're not able to go up there, and I want to pass the place on to my kids. And they have a lot to learn, Got to know where all the rocks and the reefs and everything are and how to run a boat, and it takes time to do all that. So, time is precious up there.
Fagerman's RABC permit expires in late January. The Sorlies expires January 1st. Donnie acknowledges that the RABC is a unique policy that allows people to cross an international border without checking in at customs. However, the communication, or lack thereof, is adding to the frustration regarding this situation. Meanwhile, Lisa says that the Sorlies and Chippewa Inn are heading into the peak of the holiday season with uncertainty about how their business will operate this winter and in the year ahead.
I've just been waiting with bated breath, truthfully hoping there would be an answer by now. And again, we're so grateful for the opportunity to use the RBC when we can, and I think we've all gotten so used to it that it caught us off guard to have it stopped for whatever the reason may be.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's...
Yeah, with no announcement.
I think that's the thing, is that there's so much, almost just a dumbfounded shock reaction from people of, what do you mean it's paused?
In addition to these very personal stories about the impacts of the RABC pause, you also are publishing an updated article on the Paddle and Portage web platform, and so you can go read Joe's article with updates right now.
I think it's our 4th article now on Paddle and Portage since this situation broke. I see the Canadian Broadcasting, CBC, kind of their Canadian version of NPR type thing.
Oh, everybody loves that.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's As It Happens, or whatever
shoot.
that show is called, which is produced by CBC Radio.
Yeah, I'm not Canadian.
But the CBC out of Thunder Bay, the reporter, has an article about it. Actually, Donnie mentioned, a bit surprising that more U.S. media hasn't picked up on this story, NPR and Star Tribune and so forth, because if this story impacts you, this is like a huge deal. I talked to a very prominent business owner in Duluth about this as well, who travels on the Canadian side of SAG, and it's like, yeah, this is kind of a middle finger to the people who are impacted by this, primarily because of the lack of communication. It's frustrating. It's frustrating for media. Definitely frustrating for people like Donnie, Lisa, and Darin, who we heard from today, and really appreciated them coming down. I mean, they don't want to be popping into the office and talking about this kind of stuff. They want to be popping in and talking about how great the fishing is on SAG and how busy it is heading into the winter and how Darin's so excited to go kick on the solar panels that he bought in Thunder Bay and invested all this money in. Like, they don't want to be dealing with this. They don't want to come to the office and have this conversation.
We all would rather be talking about how beautiful the, I don't know, almost foot of snow we have on the ground out there is, and how the lakes are freezing up. And unfortunately, these kind of things happen in regards to large government agencies that are trying to sort out policy, and with such large institutions that it seems likely, we see over and over again, that the impacts of these large policy changes are often overlooked when it comes to very specific niches of people, like those who live and work and whose livelihood is based on cross-border travel. So I want to say a big thank you to you, Joe Fredericks, for shining a light on these stories and helping the world to see that this is a very impactful situation for many.
I think the moment that I realized the communication was the problem here, the lack of communication, was when I emailed Trevor Gibb, the superintendent of Quetico, and said, "What are you hearing about RABCs? Is this going to impact the Cache Bay Ranger Station next year?" And Trevor wrote me back a couple hours later and said, "I haven't heard about this. What's the deal?" That's when it dawned on me, like, whoa, communication breakdown, not happening, problem. And so we'll continue to follow this story. No, like we heard from Donny and Lisa, their RABC expires January 1. Some other people's expires right around then. That's pretty much when the season for winter recreation starts up in that area at the end of the Gunflint. And hopefully we have an answer before January 1, if not well before. I'm starting to be a little less optimistic based on the communication from the Canada Border Services Agency that I'm having, where the emails are getting shorter, the response time faster, and it just keeps going back to, we've already told you everything, Joe. We'll see what happens.